The ballroom went silent the moment the billionaire stopped laughing. A crystal champagne glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered across the marble floor, but nobody even turned to look. Every eye in that luxury Manhattan hotel was locked onto one woman standing near the wine table in a cream housekeeping uniform. Victor Liang had just mocked her in Mandarin, assuming the black maid serving drinks could never understand a word he said. But Elena Brooks slowly lifted her head, stared directly into his eyes, and answered him in flawless Mandarin, so calm, so sharp, that the air itself seemed to freeze. "Invisible people hear everything," she whispered. Suddenly, the room no longer saw a maid. They saw danger. Wealthy investors exchanged nervous glances. A travel blogger's live stream camera trembled while millions watched online. Victor's arrogant smile faded for the first time in years. And Elena? She stood perfectly still beneath the chandelier lights, holding a silver wine tray like she had already seen this moment coming long before anyone else in that room even realized they were part of it.
Only 3 hours earlier, Elena Brooks had been almost completely invisible inside the hotel. She moved quietly through the staff corridors, with her cream uniform pressed perfectly, her natural curls tied neatly into a low bun, and her eyes lowered the way employees were expected to behave around billionaires. The Manhattan Imperial Hotel was hosting one of the biggest investment galas of the year, a private merger discussion involving nearly $4 billion. Politicians, CEOs, hedge fund managers, and celebrity investors filled the ballroom, while workers like Elena floated silently around them, carrying silver trays and champagne bottles. The rules inside the Imperial were simple. Staff used separate elevators. Staff never interrupted guests. Staff never became part of the story. But Elena noticed everything. She noticed which executives tipped workers and which ones snapped their fingers impatiently. She noticed Victor Liang entering the ballroom, surrounded by bodyguards like a king walking into his palace. And she noticed the way people immediately changed around him, laughing louder, standing straighter, pretending his arrogance was charm, because his money made everyone afraid to disagree with him. Victor Liang loved power more than luxury. The expensive charcoal suit, the silver watch around his wrist, the silk Mandarin pocket square folded carefully into his jacket, those were only symbols. Real power, in Victor's mind, came from making other people feel small. As Elena poured wine near his table, he glanced at her name tag with obvious annoyance. "Careful," he muttered coldly in English, before switching deliberately into Mandarin. "People like her steal better than they clean." Several investors around him laughed instantly, eager to impress him. One woman covered her mouth while smiling nervously. Another businessman avoided eye contact completely. Elena continued pouring wine without reacting, but Victor mistook her silence for ignorance. That was his first mistake. He leaned back in his chair, swirling expensive champagne inside his glass. "She probably learned English cleaning bathrooms," he added in Mandarin. This time the laughter spread wider across the table. And then Elena calmly answered him in the same language. Perfect pronunciation, perfect grammar. No anger in her voice, only disappointment. "Wealthy men usually speak the loudest when they fear being understood," she said softly. The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed felt violent. Victor slowly turned toward Elena, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Around them, conversations across the ballroom faded one by one. Chloe Bennett, a travel blogger with millions of followers, accidentally captured the entire moment while live streaming the gala atmosphere for social media. Her camera zoomed shakily toward Elena's face as comments exploded online. Wait, she understood him? Did that billionaire really just say that? This woman is terrifyingly calm. But inside the ballroom, the tension became even uglier. Daniel Reeves, the hotel's general manager, rushed toward Elena immediately. His polished corporate smile barely hid his panic. "Mr. Liang is an important guest," he whispered sharply. "You need to apologize." Elena looked at him with disbelief. "For understanding him?" she asked quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened. Nearby investors watched the scene like spectators at a public execution. Victor rose from his chair slowly, adjusting his silver watch. "Employees should remember their place," he said coldly, in English now, making sure everyone heard him clearly. Elena held his gaze without fear, but
But behind her calm eyes, something heavier moved quietly beneath the surface, something none of them understood yet. Within minutes, the video spread across social media faster than anyone inside the hotel realized. Chloe's live stream passed 200,000 viewers before the first course of dinner even ended. Hashtags about racism, class discrimination, and billionaire arrogance began trending nationwide. Daniel Reeves received 3 separate phone calls from corporate executives demanding immediate damage control. And instead of protecting Elena, he chose the safer side. Security guards approached her publicly near the center of the ballroom, while guests openly recorded videos with their phones. "Pending investigation, your staff access has been suspended," Daniel announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Humiliation rolled through the room like smoke. Elena stood frozen for a moment while strangers whispered around her. She should have stayed quiet. Why would she embarrass him publicly? People like her should be grateful for jobs like this. Marcus Hale, the head of security, motioned toward the lobby exit. Elena walked calmly, despite the cameras following her every step. But as she crossed the marble floor beneath the chandeliers, her fingers tightened around her phone, hidden inside her uniform pocket. She finally made one private call. "Not yet," she said softly after someone answered. "Let them keep talking."
Outside the ballroom, rain hammered against the massive glass windows overlooking Manhattan. Elena stood alone in the empty staff corridor while luxury guests upstairs continued drinking beneath golden lights. Her reflection stared back at her through the dark window glass, exhausted but controlled. She closed her eyes briefly as memories surfaced. Years of hearing people mistake silence for weakness. Years of wealthy executives speaking carelessly around employees they considered invisible. Footsteps approached behind her. Sophia Liang, Victor's daughter, stepped nervously into the corridor wearing an elegant white designer dress. Unlike her father, Sophia looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she admitted quietly. "He shouldn't have said those things." Elena studied her carefully. Sophia reached into her purse and offered her a thick envelope of cash. "Please, just let this disappear." Elena almost smiled. "You think this is about embarrassment," she replied calmly. "It's about structure." Sophia frowned, confused by the answer. Before she could ask another question, the nearby VIP elevator doors opened automatically beside Elena. For one strange second, the biometric system flashed green, recognizing her fingerprint access. Sophia noticed immediately. Elena stepped away before the younger woman could process what she had just seen. That tiny moment planted the first real fear inside Sophia Liang's mind. By 9 o'clock, the situation had become a corporate nightmare. Financial blogs identified Victor Liang in the viral video, while activist accounts demanded boycotts against the Imperial Hotel chain. Sponsors threatened to withdraw $48 million from the merger event if the scandal continued spreading overnight. Inside a private office above the ballroom, Victor paced furiously, while Daniel Reeves tried calming him down. "She's just an employee," Daniel insisted nervously. "We'll fire her quietly." Victor slammed his glass onto the table. "No," he snapped. "Now she's a problem." Downstairs, Elena sat alone in a dim employee lounge, scrolling through thousands of online comments. Some people defended her. Others accused her of creating drama for attention. She seemed strangely unaffected by all of it. Then her phone vibrated again. This time she answered immediately. "It's almost time," the voice on the other end said. Elena looked toward the ballroom ceiling above her. "Good," she whispered. Meanwhile, Victor made another call of his own, contacting Richard Coleman, one of the hotel group's most powerful board members. Within 30 minutes, Richard appeared through a giant conference screen in the ballroom, publicly supporting Victor and dismissing Elena as replaceable staff. The room applauded. They thought the story was ending. They had no idea it was only beginning. At exactly 9:41 p.m., the ballroom lights dimmed for the merger ceremony. Cameras flashed while investors gathered near the main stage, holding champagne glasses beneath enormous crystal chandeliers. Victor Liang adjusted his tie confidently as he prepared to deliver a speech about unity and global opportunity. Then the ballroom doors opened. Every conversation stopped instantly. Elena Brooks walked slowly into the room, wearing a perfectly tailored navy blazer instead of her housekeeping uniform. Her posture had changed completely. She no longer moved like staff. She moved like ownership. The soft sound of her heels echoed across the marble floor while confusion spread through the crowd. Victor stared at her with visible disbelief. "What is this?" Daniel muttered nervously. Before anyone could react, every executive phone inside the ballroom vibrated simultaneously. Guests pulled out their devices one by one, reading the exact same emergency notification. Merger suspended. EB Holdings. A ripple of panic moved through the room. Sophia's face drained of color first. She looked from the email back toward Elena. EB, she whispered slowly. Victor suddenly understood too. Elena Brooks. EB Holdings. The silent maid standing before them owned enough controlling shares to stop the entire merger instantly. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed normally anymore. Elena stepped onto the stage with terrifying calm, while security guards hesitated, uncertain whether they were looking at an employee or someone far above their authority. Victor tried recovering his composure. "This is some kind of stunt," he snapped angrily. Elena ignored him completely. Instead, she switched smoothly into fluent Mandarin and began addressing the international investors directly. The ballroom froze again. But this time it wasn't shock. It was fear. Elena spoke about labor violations hidden inside company reports. She spoke about discrimination lawsuits buried before shareholder meetings. She cited exact legal clauses tied to ethics compliance inside the merger agreement. Every word landed like a blade. Giant screens behind the stage displayed confidential financial documents, while whispers spread violently across the ballroom. Guests began leaving tables. Investors checked phones frantically. Chloe Bennett's live stream passed 8 million viewers as comments exploded faster than moderators could control. Victor stepped toward Elena furiously. "You planned this?" he demanded. Elena finally turned toward him calmly. "No," she answered quietly. "You planned this the moment you decided someone like me couldn't possibly understand you." The boardroom above the ballroom felt colder than the storm outside. Rain crashed against the glass walls, while executives sat frozen around a massive table illuminated by harsh white light. Elena stood at the far end, controlling a digital presentation screen filled with security footage, payroll records, deleted emails, and employee complaints. Victor's confidence was disappearing piece by piece. For 8 months, Elena had secretly worked inside the Imperial Hotel as a housekeeper while documenting systematic abuse against immigrant workers and black employees. Wage theft, promotion discrimination, complaint suppression, retaliation against anyone who spoke too loudly. She had collected everything quietly, while executives walked past her without ever noticing. 312 ignored complaints, Elena stated calmly while changing slides. 64% of minority workers denied promotion opportunities. Daniel Reeves looked physically sick. Richard Coleman tried interrupting repeatedly, but Elena silenced him with more evidence every time. Then came the final blow. Sophia Liang stood slowly from her chair and revealed that her father personally pressured executives to bury discrimination reports before the merger negotiations. Victor looked at his daughter like a man watching his own empire collapse from inside. Victor Liang finally exploded. "You manipulated everyone," he shouted, slamming both hands against the glass table hard enough to shake the room. Thunder rolled outside the skyscraper windows at the exact same moment. Elena didn't flinch. She simply watched him with the same controlled expression she had worn while serving drinks earlier that night. "No," she answered softly. "I listened." The room fell silent again. One by one, the executives began realizing how completely trapped they were. Federal investigations would begin within days if Elena released the evidence publicly. The merger partners were already suspending negotiations. International investors were leaving the hotel. Stock futures were collapsing in real time across Asian markets. Victor's empire was bleeding billions by the minute. Yet, Elena still wasn't shouting. That frightened them more than anger ever could. She stepped closer to the table, slowly. "You built this company using invisible people," she said quietly. "Housekeepers, kitchen staff, immigrants, workers you trained yourselves not to see." Victor lowered his eyes for the first time that night. Elena placed one final document onto the table. An ultimatum. Public accountability, independent oversight, worker protection reform, or complete exposure before market opening. Nobody slept inside the Imperial Hotel that night.
Reporters surrounded the building before sunrise, while financial news channels replayed Victor Liang's Mandarin insults beside footage of Elena exposing the corporation's internal corruption. Across social media, public opinion shifted violently. The woman once mocked as just a maid had become the face of one of the biggest corporate scandals in recent memory. Victor resigned 48 hours later. Daniel Reeves was terminated before noon the next day. Richard Coleman disappeared behind legal statements and emergency meetings. But Elena never celebrated publicly. That confused people the most. Instead of revenge interviews or emotional speeches, she focused entirely on rebuilding the system itself. Within weeks, she launched the Fair Hospitality Initiative across every property connected to the hotel group. Anonymous worker reporting systems were installed. Employee complaints would now be reviewed by independent investigators instead of internal managers. Salary transparency policies became mandatory. Separate staff entrances were permanently removed. Housekeepers who once lowered their eyes while walking past executives now entered through the same marble lobby beneath the same golden chandeliers. Elena insisted on one thing repeatedly during every press conference. Justice means nothing, she said calmly, if the structure stays exactly the same afterward. Months later, the Imperial Hotel no longer felt like the same building. Workers spoke more openly. Managers behaved differently when cameras weren't around. Promotion statistics slowly improved. The fear that once controlled the staff corridors had weakened. Chloe Bennett released a documentary called Invisible Floors, using footage from the night everything changed. Millions watched it within days. Yet Elena herself remained strangely private, despite becoming internationally recognized. She refused magazine covers repeatedly. She declined invitations from political commentators who wanted dramatic interviews. People expected rage from her. Instead, they found discipline. One evening, Sophia Liang visited Elena alone inside the now-renovated hotel lounge. Gone were the separate employee entrances and hidden service pathways. "Why didn't you expose them immediately?" Sophia finally asked quietly. Elena looked toward the workers moving freely through the lobby. "Because outrage changes headlines," she answered after a long silence. "Evidence changes systems." Sophia lowered her eyes slowly. For the first time in her privileged life, she understood exactly what her father had never learned. Real power wasn't loud. It didn't need to humiliate people publicly. Real power could stand silently in the middle of a ballroom, endure humiliation, and still control the outcome without raising its voice. Victor Liang vanished from public life almost completely after the scandal. Financial analysts called it one of the fastest reputational collapses in corporate history. But Elena rarely spoke his name anymore. In private, she admitted something few people expected. Victor himself was never the true enemy. The real enemy was the system that taught wealthy people they could treat workers like furniture without consequences. That system existed long before Victor entered the ballroom that night, and it would continue existing unless someone forced it to change. Elena understood that better than anyone because she had lived on both sides of power. She had sat inside executive meetings worth billions of dollars, and she had also cleaned wine stains from marble floors while executives ignored her existence entirely. She knew how quickly people revealed their real character when they believed someone beneath them couldn't fight back. That was why she never shouted during the confrontation. She wanted the world to hear them clearly. She wanted the cameras rolling when powerful people exposed themselves willingly. And perhaps the most terrifying thing about Elena Brooks was this: she never lost control, even once, while destroying an empire that thought she was invisible. Late one night, Elena stood alone beside the giant glass windows overlooking Manhattan, while rain rolled softly across the city below. The ballroom downstairs glowed warmly beneath restored chandeliers, but the atmosphere had changed forever. Staff members laughed openly now. Employees walked confidently through spaces once reserved only for executives. Somewhere downstairs, a young housekeeper greeted a wealthy guest without lowering her eyes first. Elena noticed immediately. Small moments like that mattered most to her. Not headlines, not money, not revenge. The world would probably remember the scandal for Victor Liang's humiliation, or the viral Mandarin confrontation that destroyed a billionaire publicly. But Elena remembered something different. She remembered the silence in that ballroom before she answered him. The silence of people too afraid to speak because power had convinced them they were smaller than they really were. That silence existed in offices, airplanes, restaurants, hotels, and streets everywhere. And maybe that was why millions connected so deeply with her story. Because deep down, everyone understands what it feels like to be underestimated. But very few people ever get the chance to turn that humiliation into something powerful enough to change the entire room forever.